They don't respect the one who stays. Not the one who forgives. Not the one who explains. Not the one who keeps giving chances, hoping they'll finally see your worth. They respect the one who disappears. No tears. No anger. Just silence. A calm, colder than steel. And suddenly, the world rearranges itself around your absence. Not because you threatened them, but because you no longer needed them. This world doesn't reward kindness. It rewards boundaries. It respects the man or the woman who can walk away without flinching. You thought patience was a virtue, but in the eyes of the manipulator, it's a green light, a signal that says I can step on you, and you'll still stay. And lust. Lust is not just about the body. It hides behind the swipe, the unread message, the like you crave as if it were oxygen. You thought it was love, but it was addiction dressed in sweet words and dopamine. Machiavelli once said, "If you cannot be both loved and feared, then choose to be feared." This video won't teach you how to be loved. It will teach you how to be impossible to ignore. It will show you how to walk away so silently, so confidently, that your absence becomes the loudest thing they hear. Have you ever sat in a room with someone you cared about and felt completely invisible? Like your presence was a convenience, like your silence was expected, like your kindness was nothing but background noise. You showed up, you forgave, you stayed up late just to listen. You answered quickly, you gave, without keeping score. And yet, you were the one forgotten first. The one who got blamed last. The one whose loyalty was never reciprocated. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you were too available. That's the pain no one talks about. Not heartbreak, but slow erosion. The daily draining of dignity in exchange for the illusion of connection. You tried harder. You opened up. You gave more of yourself, hoping that someday they'd finally see you. But they never did. And deep down, you started asking the question you swore you'd never ask. What's wrong with me? Nothing. That's the first truth you need to hear. There is nothing wrong with you. The problem was never your heart. It was your threshold. It was the fact that you never made people pay for disrespecting you. And when people don't pay, they don't value. They take. They test. They push until they find no resistance. And then they walk away with everything you gave, while calling you the weak one. That's the real cruelty. They make you feel guilty for the very love they kept exploiting. And here's what stings the most. You knew. You saw the red flags. You heard the excuses. You felt the shift. But you stayed. Because deep inside, you thought staying was proof of strength. That maybe, if you endured a little more, it would all mean something. You weren't being patient. You were being conditioned. Conditioned to chase clarity, to over-explain, to prove your worth. And every time you did, you trained them to stop respecting you. Let that sink in. Every unanswered message, every time they pushed you away and you leaned in closer, every time you let your silence be filled with self-doubt instead of boundaries, you were teaching them a dangerous lesson. I'll stay no matter what you do. And they believed you. Not because they're evil, not because they're broken, but because they live in a world that rewards leverage over love, power over presence. And you, with your open heart and your open hands, were an easy target in a battlefield disguised as a relationship. But that ends now. This isn't a story about how others broke you. It's a story about how you'll stop handing them the hammer. Because underneath all that pain, all that exhaustion, is a fire. A quiet rage that doesn't want revenge. It wants clarity. It wants sovereignty. It wants peace without permission. And the first step is to name what really happened. They didn't love you. They used your fear of being unloved. They didn't value you. They consumed your attention like fuel. They weren't confused. They were calculating. And when someone realizes they can control your emotions with distance, they'll keep pulling away, just to keep you chasing. You think you're fighting for connection, but you're feeding a system designed to keep you emotionally starving. And the only way to break it is to do the one thing they never expected. Disappear. No speech. No explanation. No closure. Just stillness. Like a door that closes slowly, quietly, but locks from the inside. Let's go deeper. Why is it that even when you know someone is hurting you, you stay? Why do you ignore the warning signs? Why do you give them the benefit of the doubt even when it costs you your peace? It's not stupidity. It's not weakness. It's programming. You see, the human brain isn't wired for clarity. It's wired for survival. And in childhood, many of us learned the same dangerous rule. If I'm good enough, they'll stay. So what happens? You become the pleaser, the fixer, the over-explainer. You internalize rejection as a reflection of your worth, not their character. And you develop a trauma bond, not a connection. A loop. Pain. Hope. Craving. Reward. Withdrawal. Repeat. It's not a relationship. It's a chemical addiction. The dopamine hits every time they pull you close. The cortisol spikes every time they disappear. The brain doesn't recognize betrayal. It only recognizes the cycle. And it's the cycle that keeps you stuck. Not love. Not compatibility, just familiarity. But here's the trap. The more unpredictable someone is, the more addictive they become. When they alternate between warmth and cold, between validation and silence. They hijack your nervous system. They don't even have to be toxic on purpose. The pattern alone is powerful enough. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. It's the same method used in casinos. You don't win every time. You win just enough to keep you pulling the lever. And when you finally walk away, your body doesn't feel free. It feels empty. Because chaos became comfort. Neglect became normal. And silence became something you feared instead of something you used. And here's where it gets darker. Modern systems know this. Social media is engineered to keep you craving. Notifications, likes, message delays, all of it mirrors emotional manipulation. They don't want you fulfilled. They want you scrolling, yearning, comparing, consuming. Because a person who is whole doesn't need what they're selling. Machiavelli didn't write about Instagram, but he understood the core law of control. Men are driven by two things, fear and desire. Control the craving, control the man. And in a world where every platform, product, and person is trying to seduce your attention, craving is the new currency. Which means discipline is the new rebellion. To step back, to be silent, to not need them, that's terrifying to manipulators. Because now, they can't predict you. They can't play you. They can't extract anything from you. When you stop chasing, they lose their power. But here's the catch. You have to unlearn the instinct to chase. Not just in love. In life. Because most people don't fear being alone. They fear being unvalidated. They fear not being chosen. Not being noticed. Not being seen. But the paradox is this. The more you beg to be seen, the more invisible you become. The more you explain your worth, the more you discount it. Respect doesn't live in justification. It lives in energy, presence, silence. And that's what they fear most. Not your words, not your feelings, not your pain. They fear your absence, because in that stillness, they can no longer control the narrative. They can no longer minimize you. They can no longer use your need for clarity against you. So what do? You stop broadcasting. You reclaim your mystery. You learn to live without updates, replies, apologies, or closure. Because once you stop explaining yourself, you start becoming undeniable. Let's call it out. The reason most people keep getting hurt isn't because they're stupid. It's because they're too kind in the wrong context. It starts with a belief that if you just love hard enough, prove yourself enough, explain yourself clearly enough, they'll finally get it. They'll finally change. They'll finally respect you. But they don't. Because the truth is harsh. People don't respect what's always available. They don't value what explains itself. They don't cherish what never walks away. Here's where good people go wrong. Mistake number 1. Thinking love can fix dysfunction. You give. And give. And give, not realizing that your love isn't healing them. It's enabling them. You mistake sacrifice for strength. You confuse tolerance with patience. But real love requires boundaries. Without them, what you're offering isn't devotion. It's self-destruction. Mistake number 2. Over-explaining your worth. You send long texts. You break down your feelings. You try to be the mature one. But all they see is a performance, a desperate attempt to convince them of what you should have simply walked away from. Here's a brutal truth. The more you explain, the less you're heard. Because the moment you start justifying your standards, you've already lowered them. Mistake number 3. Waiting for closure from the one who caused the damage. You wait for an apology. You wait for accountability. You wait for the moment they wake up and realize what they lost. But closure is a trap. You don't need their understanding. You need your decision. Waiting for closure is like bleeding in front of the one who stabbed you and asking them to explain why it hurt. Mistake number 4. Confusing presence with peace. You think, at least they're still here. But presence isn't connection. Attention isn't love. Consistency doesn't mean care. Some people stay close not because they care about you, but because they enjoy the control. Because they want access without responsibility. Because they like watching you not walk away. Mistake number 5. Making excuses for disrespect. They're just going through something. They didn't mean it. They're not usually like this. Listen, context matters, yes. But repeated behavior is a decision. And every time you let it slide, you're teaching them how to treat you. If they can disrespect you and still have access to you, they will never change. Why should they? Mistake number 6. Thinking silence means peace. You stop arguing. You stop bringing it up. You go numb. But silence without boundaries is not growth. It's surrender. It's resignation dressed up as maturity. There's a difference between quiet strength and silent suffering. And people can sense which one you're living in. These mistakes don't make you weak. They make you human. You loved with your whole heart. You stayed because you believed in the good. You hoped because that's what good people do. But Machiavelli never taught people to hope. He taught them to observe, to calculate, to act from clarity, not emotion. He would say, a ruler must be both fox and lion, cunning enough to see the trap and strong enough to tear through it. Right now, you've been neither. You've been the lamb. Gentle, available, predictable. And what happens to the lamb in a world full of wolves? It gets studied. It gets used. It gets forgotten. But here's the twist. The lamb can evolve. It can learn. It can shed the skin of sacrifice and grow the gaze of a sovereign. And it starts by doing the one thing you've been afraid to do. Stop explaining. Stop justifying. Stop staying. You've been told to be good, to be kind, to be fair, to treat others the way you want to be treated. But Machiavelli, he wrote a different scripture, one not for saints, but for survivors. He didn't write for the man who wants to be liked. He wrote for the man who wants to last. It is better to be feared than to be loved. If you cannot be both, let that settle in. In a world where people interpret silence as weakness, kindness as access, and love as leverage, Machiavelli didn't sugarcoat human nature. He exposed it. He saw how flattery deceives, how appearance overrides substance, and how those who overshare intentions are the first to be outmaneuvered. And perhaps his most brutal insight: men judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Translation: perception is stronger than truth. If you look predictable, you will be manipulated. If you speak too much, you'll be outplayed. If you let people know what moves you, what scares you, what keeps you attached, you've handed them the blueprint for your destruction. That's not pessimism. That's psychological warfare. And you've been losing it because you thought virtue alone was protection. It's not. Machiavelli understood kindness without calculation is suicide. Forgiveness without boundary is an invitation for repeated betrayal. He wasn't saying to be cruel. He was saying to be strategic. Because the people you're trying to reason with, many of them aren't reasoning with you. They're reading you. Your tells, your tone, your silence. You think you're expressing your heart, but what you're doing is broadcasting emotional vulnerabilities to an audience that may not have your well-being in mind. That's why Machiavelli admired restraint. He praised the ruler who could act without explaining, who could strike without warning. He said, "The vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances. A wise prince never keeps flatterers close. Unarmed prophets made violent ends." All of it circles back to this. Power is not found in noise. It's found in what you withhold, in your ability to observe without reacting, to feel deeply yet reveal nothing, to love fully yet lose nothing of yourself in the process. Imagine walking into a room and not needing to be liked, not needing to be seen, not needing to explain yourself to anyone. That is freedom. Not just freedom from others, freedom from your own compulsions, from the need to prove, to chase, to please. When you no longer fear being misunderstood, you become untouchable. Because the world is full of people trying to control perception, trying to dominate through emotional chaos, trying to get your reaction, your reply, your explanation, so they can feel powerful. But when you remain still, when you disappear without a single word, you become what Machiavelli called a sovereign. Not a pawn, not a preacher, a presence. And presence, when properly wielded, commands attention without asking, demands respect without force, reveals nothing, but causes others to question everything. This is not about revenge. It's about remembering who you are before you started begging. Because power, real power, isn't about dominance. It's about self-possession. And when people feel that in you, when they realize your peace cannot be purchased, your silence cannot be broken, and your presence is no longer accessible, they don't just miss you. They fear you. Not because you harmed them, but because you're now beyond their reach, beyond their control, beyond the narrative they once wrote about you. And that is what Machiavelli understood better than anyone. He didn't ask you to become cold. He asked you to become clear. Clear in your standards. Clear in your detachment. Clear in your ability to love and still walk away. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when the pain no longer crushes you. It sharpens you. You don't cry anymore. You calculate. You don't beg for closure. You become the closure. You don't ask why they left, why they lied, why they forgot. You ask a better question. Why did I tolerate it? That's the moment the shift begins. The moment you stop being the victim and become the observer. You look at your life like a map. Not just the places you've been, but the patterns you've repeated. Who did I chase? What did I allow? Where did I shrink myself to keep the peace? And then the answer hits you like lightning. You weren't afraid of being hurt. You were afraid of being alone. You weren't chasing love. You were chasing proof that you were lovable. And that's the wound. Not what they did, but what you believed about yourself because of it. You thought their silence meant you weren't worthy. You thought their indifference meant you weren't enough. You thought being needed was the same as being valued. But here's the truth. Needing you is not the same as respecting you. Wanting you is not the same as honoring you. And loving you doesn't mean they know how to treat you. So the shift isn't about becoming colder. It's about becoming clearer. Clear about your worth. Clear about your standards. Clear about what you will and will not explain. Because healing isn't loud. It's not you posting about your peace. It's not you faking detachment. Healing is when you can feel the urge to respond and choose silence instead. When the craving for validation returns and you stay still. When you remember the betrayal and you no longer flinch. That's real growth. Not in how loudly you cut people off, but in how quietly you no longer make room for them. It's in your energy, your posture, your calm refusal to play the same game twice. You become someone they can't read anymore, and that terrifies them, because they only knew how to control the version of you that over-explained, that folded, that stayed. Now, you're silent, not out of fear, but power. You've stopped being predictable. You've stopped being available for chaos. You've stopped leaking your energy into conversations that go nowhere. And the world notices. People pause around you now. They measure their words. Because they can sense you're no longer reacting, you're responding. You're not desperate for clarity. You've become the clarity. You no longer beg to be chosen. You choose yourself. And the people who once fed on your neediness, they fall silent. Because you've stopped auditioning for affection, you've stopped handing out free access to someone who has earned their value. That is the Machiavellian shift. You don't announce it. You embody it. You move through the world like a sovereign. Not cold, but calculated. Not heartless, but honest. Not distant, but disciplined. Because you've learned, you can love someone and still walk away. You can forgive someone and never speak again. You can want peace and still enforce boundaries that make people uncomfortable. And that version of you, the one who walks in silence, who chooses presence over performance, who values energy over explanation, that version can't be manipulated anymore. Because you no longer live in reaction. You live in command. Let's bring it down from theory to ground level. Because the shift is not just emotional, it's behavioral. It shows up in your habits, your routines, your boundaries. People don't respect what you say. They respect what you enforce. And real-world power starts here. Power is presence. Not loud, not aggressive, still, deliberate. When you walk into a room, you don't need to announce yourself. Your stillness says everything. You don't rush. You don't fidget. You don't overshare. Why? Because you're not trying to fill the silence. You are the silence. Power is in what you withhold. When someone disrespects you, the old, you would explain, rationalize, try to fix it. The new you observe, you note it, and you adjust access. No arguments, no guilt, no scene. You simply stop offering what they never valued. Because when you withdraw without drama, they feel your absence more than they ever felt your presence. Power is discipline. Discipline with your attention, your time, your reactions. You don't respond to every message. You don't give energy to passive-aggressive comments. You don't chase validation like a starving animal. You've trained yourself to pause, to breathe, to choose the long-term gain over short-term gratification. And in a world of impulse, addicts, that makes you rare and dangerous. Power is unpredictability. Predictable people get used. Unpredictable people get studied. You don't show all your cards. You don't reveal your next move. You don't tell people how much you care until they've earned the right to know. That's not manipulation. That's control. And control is what you lost when you tried to be understood by everyone. Stop trying to be understood. Start becoming unreadable. Power is ritual. Every morning you sit with yourself. Not the phone. Not the noise. Just you. You breathe. You journal. You scan your mind like a general before battle. Where is my energy leaking? What am I tolerating that's beneath me? What will I reclaim today? You lift. You read. You work. Not for attention. Not to prove. But because your self-respect depends on it. Power is brutal honesty with yourself. You ask questions most people avoid. Am I lonely? Or just undisciplined? Am I craving them? Or avoiding myself? Am I bored? Or simply unaligned with my purpose? These questions are sharp, uncomfortable, but they clean the infection. Because until you get honest with yourself, you'll keep repeating the same cycles, just with different faces. Power is in walking away and meaning it. Anyone can threaten to leave. Few can actually walk calmly, completely, and without needing to be seen. When you walk away without warning, without posting cryptic quotes, without checking their stories, they don't know if you're gone or if you're watching. And that ambiguity, that's power. Because the strongest presence is the one they can't access anymore. Power is focus. You stop chasing people and start building your body, your business, your mind, your peace. Now, when they come back, and they will, they find someone unrecognizable, not cold, not arrogant, just unreachable. Because you're not living in reaction anymore. You're building a kingdom, one that doesn't bend for visitors, one that doesn't explain its walls, one that chooses who gets through the gate and who gets left outside. Now picture this. You've stopped chasing. You've stopped begging. You've stopped explaining. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you've become someone unshakable. You move with purpose. You speak less, but every word lands like iron. You listen more, but no one knows what you're really thinking. You don't posture. You don't flaunt. You don't try to impress. And because of that, everyone feels your presence. You walk into a room, and people shift. Not because you're loud, but because you've become the kind of man or woman who doesn't need to be noticed, because you've already noticed yourself. This is what Machiavelli would call sovereignty, not dominance over others, dominance over self. Because in a world obsessed with lust, attention, applause, you've learned the secret truth. What's rare becomes revered. You used to overgive. Now you protect your energy like gold. You used to over-explain. Now you let silence be the verdict. You used to overcommit. Now you say no, without flinching. Not out of spite, but out of respect. You've stopped bleeding for those who wouldn't even offer a bandage. You've stopped handing access to those who only came to take. You've stopped hoping they'll change because you've already changed. And the more you grow, the more obvious it becomes. You never needed their validation. You needed your own permission. Permission to leave, to rise, to rebuild. Now people come to you differently. The same ones who once ignored you, disrespected you, tested you. Now they choose their words more carefully. Because you've become the mirror, the reflection of everything they failed to appreciate when it was freely given. And when they test you again with a breadcrumb, a half apology, hey stranger, you don't react. You don't fantasize. You don't rehearse what to say. You just don't respond. And in that moment, something beautiful happens. You realize you've outgrown them. Not from ego, but from evolution. This new face of power isn't about becoming a robot. You still feel, you still love, but now it's precise. You love from overflow, not from desperation. You give without needing it, returned. You choose intimacy, not intensity. Depth, not drama. Clarity, not confusion. People don't make you question your worth anymore. Because your life, your rituals, your body, your peace already proves it. This version of you has quiet eyes, a steady voice, a calm that makes others feel exposed. You don't threaten. You don't chase. You don't beg. And because of that, you become unforgettable. Not because of your beauty, not because of your status, but because your absence now speaks louder than anything you ever said. And let's be honest, some people will call you cold, dramatic, unreachable. Let them. People who only respected you when you were small will never know how to love you once you've grown. Because they didn't love you, they loved your weakness, your accessibility, your predictability. Now that you're sovereign, now that you no longer explain, no longer seek, no longer kneel, they're afraid, not of you, but of their own irrelevance. Because once you walk, truly walk, they can no longer use your loyalty to keep themselves warm. So who are you now? You are the man who commands through silence, the woman who protects her energy like a queen protects her throne. You are no longer consumed by lust, noise, or need. You are clarity. You are presence. You are power without performance. You're not here to be liked. You're not here to be chosen. You're not here to prove, to chase, or to explain yourself to people who never had the eyes to truly see you. You're here to be sovereign, to walk like someone whose presence is not a question, but a recalibration, a stillness that rearranges rooms, a silence that exposes motives, a gaze that says, you cannot afford what I no longer offer for free. You used to beg for clarity. Now, you are the clarity. You used to explain your heart to people who only wanted access. Not understanding, you used to keep the door open, hoping they would grow, return, apologize. Now, You've closed the door, locked it, and thrown away the key, not in anger, but in peace. Because true peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of standards, and your standards now walk ahead of you. They speak before you speak. They guard the gates to your time, your energy, your soul. If they don't respect your words, you give them your silence. If they don't value your presence, you give them your absence. If they cannot rise to meet you, you do not descend to reach them. You walk, not to punish, not to prove. You walk because you've remembered who you are. This is not a story about becoming cold. This is a story about becoming clear. Clear on what love is. Clear on what respect looks like. Clear on what will no longer be tolerated. Explained. Or negotiated. Because in the end, those who only respected you when you left never deserved you when you stayed. So walk. Walk slowly. Walk silently. Walk sovereign. Let them feel what they thought they'd never lose. Because the moment you stopped explaining, you became unforgettable. The moment you stopped begging, you became dangerous. And the moment you stopped offering access, you became royalty. If this message became a mirror for you, say something in the comments. Let this be the moment your silence becomes strategy. Let this be the day your power begins. Not with words, but with presence. Support this message with a super thanks. It helps this team keep creating more work that cuts deep, heals true, and empowers the steady and the quiet to rise. And remember this, you are not soft, you are sacred, and sacred things are never touched without cost. Now go, live it, and let your absence echo louder than their noise ever did.